She whispered, "Save me," and the warrior's heart broke when he saw her face. The desert night stretched endlessly, painted in silver by the moon. Winds carried whispers through the canyons, the kind of silence that could either comfort or suffocate. For To-ya, the Navajo warrior, silence was a companion. His horse moved steadily beneath him, hooves pressing into the earth, each step echoing the rhythm of his weary heart. He had fought battles no one remembered, carried wounds no one saw, and guarded his people against dangers both real and imagined. To be a warrior was to be a shield, unyielding and strong, but strength carried a loneliness he seldom admitted. As he rode beneath the stars, thinking only of rest, the silence broke. "Save me. I can't breathe." The words were faint, muffled, but filled with such desperation that To-ya's entire body froze. His hand tightened on the reins, his breath caught in his throat. He strained to hear again. The desert was vast, and sounds often deceived, but this was no trick of the wind. This was human. This was fear. To-ya dismounted in one swift movement, his boots sinking into the soft earth. His heart pounded with urgency as he followed the sound, guided by instinct more than sight. He moved through shadows, his senses sharpened as though the night itself pointed the way. Then he saw her, kneeling in the dirt, a rough sack tied cruelly over her head, her wrists bound behind her back. Her body shook violently, every breath a struggle, every movement a cry for help. His knife flashed, swift and sure, cutting the ropes that bit into her skin. He ripped the sack away with a force that betrayed his dread. And when he saw her face, his blood ran cold. It was Elena. Her features, though streaked with dirt and tears, were unmistakable. The healer. The woman who had once nursed his mother back from the brink of death. The woman who offered herbs to crying children, who gave her food to the hungry, who smiled even when exhaustion bent her shoulders. She was the gentle soul who gave without thought of return, who poured herself into others until nothing remained. Her lips trembled, her eyes wide with fear, but even in that moment of cruelty, a familiar strength glimmered there. To-ya, her voice was broken, fragile, yet her spirit clung to life. His own voice cracked as he whispered, "Why would anyone do this to you?" Her body shuddered as she leaned into him, breath shallow, her hands still trembling from captivity. He gave her water, holding the flask to her lips with fingers that shook more than hers. For all his years of battle, nothing had prepared him for this sight of cruelty inflicted on someone who had only ever given light. "They said I interfered too much," Elena whispered, her voice trembling. "That I gave to the weak. That I made them lazy. That I wasted my gifts. But how? How could I stop helping? How could I turn away when I saw suffering?" Tears filled her eyes, spilling onto her cheeks. To-ya's chest tightened with something heavier than rage. He had fought enemies with arrows and spears, had known the fury of men in battle, but this was something darker. The cruelty of spirit. The blindness that called compassion weakness. "You gave me back my mother's life," he said, his voice low, shaking. "You gave back hope to people who had none. And they call that weakness?" His fists clenched until his knuckles turned white. "Then their hearts are weaker than any enemy I've faced." Her lips quivered, but she met his gaze with the quiet fire he remembered. "Kindness is often seen as weakness, warrior. But I cannot change who I am." And it struck him, like lightning. True strength was not carved in scars or measured in victories. True strength lived in a heart that chose compassion, even when cruelty was easier. He pressed his forehead to hers, a silent vow forming in his soul. "No one will ever silence your light again." But saving Elena was only the beginning. Word of her rescue spread quickly through the tribe. Some whispered gratitude, families she had healed, children she had fed. But others, hardened by fear and pride, muttered that her mercy made the tribe soft. That compassion bred weakness. To-ya found himself torn. He had been raised in the code of warriors, strength, endurance, fearlessness. Yet every time he looked at Elena, fragile but unbroken, he saw a courage greater than any battle he had fought. Nights later, as the council gathered by the great fire, voices clashed like weapons. Accusations filled the air. She feeds those who do not fight. She wastes her gifts on the undeserving. She makes our people depend on her handouts. Toya rose to his feet. The murmurs died at once, silence falling heavy under his presence. He stood tall, the firelight casting shadows across his face. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. You call her weak, he said, each word striking the air, but tell me, what is stronger than a woman who gives when others would take? Who heals when others would destroy? Who stands unshaken, even when bound and beaten? No one answered. The fire crackled, spitting sparks into the night. Pride and shame flickered in their eyes, but none dared meet his gaze. From that night, the air shifted. Not immediately, but like a seed planted in dry ground. Slowly, it began to grow. Elena recovered slowly, her body marked by her ordeal, but her spirit never faltered. She returned to her work, tending wounds, teaching children to find healing herbs, comforting the grieving. And to the astonishment of many, Toya was at her side. The fiercest warrior of the tribe, the man once feared for his wrath, now gathered herbs at dawn and carried water at dusk. He built fires for her patients, held children so she could work, and stood watch at her door. His hands that once held weapons now held baskets of roots and leaves. Some mocked him at first, whispering that the warrior had been tamed by the healer. But others saw something more, a strength in humility, a power in service. One evening, as he knelt by the fire, a small child tugged at his sleeve. Warrior, she asked softly, is it true you saved Elena because she once saved your mother? Toya smiled, a rare and gentle smile that softened his scarred face. Yes, little one. But I learned something greater that night. She did not only save my mother. She saved me too. The child frowned. But you are strong. You did not need saving. Toya touched her chest gently. Strength is not only in the arm, child. It is here. In the heart that chooses love, even when hate would be easier. Seasons passed, and the tribe changed. Families shared food more freely. Children learned not only to fight, but to heal. Men who once scorned compassion found themselves humbled by its quiet power. Where pride and fear had ruled, kindness began to take root. Elena became more than a healer. She became a symbol, a living reminder that kindness was strength, that compassion was not weakness but the greatest courage of all. People who once mocked her now sought her counsel, and they listened. And always, beside her, stood Toya. He was no less a warrior, but his legacy was no longer carved only in battles. He was revered for his heart, for being the man who had been transformed by a single cry for help. On quiet nights, when the desert winds whispered, Elena and Toya would sit by the fire. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they shared silence. But always, he remembered the moment he tore the sack from her face and vowed never to let her light be silenced. And Elena remembered the strength in his voice when he declared she was not weak, but the bravest of all. Because sometimes, saving another means saving yourself.